Local capacity, localization and locally led response research. Wala daw kaming capacity dahil hindi pang sphere standards ang aming response. Paano naman kami magiging compliant kung ang konti ng pondo na binibigay sa amin? Dekada na ang binibilang natin sa capacity building at hanggang ngayon ay wala pa rin daw kaming capacity. Panay training namin sa standards, pero hinahanap naman sa amin ay panay due diligence. Bandang huli, hindi naman pala kami pwedeng mag-apply dahil hindi naman pala kami eligible for direct funding dahil local kami. Of course not. Philippine NGOs are highly capacitated. If you refer to capacity as those of international NGOs, then of course local NGOs will be labeled as lacking capacity. We must recognize that disaster response is the duty of the government, and the humanitarian capacity needed is filling the gaps of government. That is the very strength and capacity of local civil society. Ilan lang ito sa mga kwento ng mga local organizations tungkol sa issue ng humanitarian localization at locally led response. During the 2016 World Humanitarian Summit, it was recognized that the global humanitarian system was ineffective, inefficient, and funds were concentrated in the hands of international actors. Less than 2% of the global humanitarian funds were directly given to local actors. Through the grand bargain, donors and international NGOs agreed to transform the humanitarian system and increase direct funding to 25%. And yet, after 2019, direct funding to local organizations was just above 2%. The dialogues revealed that the issue of localization was not just about funding. The main goal was for local organizations to lead the disaster response. But ironically, much of the debates and localization campaigns were being led by international actors. Localization was a felt but not an explicitly discussed issue amongst local actors. There were varied definitions of localization and locally led response. Many were circular definitions of local actors provided opportunities to lead humanitarian projects. This pointed out that the global debate was not about the romanticized role of local actors as first responders. Instead, local actors needed to have access and control over humanitarian funds and projects. Further elaboration pointed towards localization as the process of building strategic partnerships, sharing resources and capacities, and promoting an environment that enables local leadership in quality humanitarian interactions. With locally led response as an outcome, respondents defined it as local actors being empowered to drive relevant and timely humanitarian interactions towards people-centered development. From these, the issue of power of locals to lead was highlighted. Lack of capacity of local actors was the most common impediment identified by donors and international actors. Especially for local actors who emphasized collective action of communities instead of their own contribution, the low regard for visibility supposedly has given the impression that they lack humanitarian capacity. Visibility has been changing in recent years, wherein international actors have been more conscious of recognizing actions of local actors. While local actors do coordinate their responses in LGU platforms, their irregular attendance to prioritize actual operations and the dominance of international actors in coordination platforms added to this perception of low capacity. Most local organizations were said to be beholden to local politicians, since many were formed primarily to access resources from LGUs. Beyond accessing resources for communities, it was more strategic that responding local actors were applying rights-based approaches and empowering communities. Lack of understanding of standards was perceived as a sign of lack of capacity. Adherence was a challenge since local actors often received pivoted development funds. Priority was to maximize number of beneficiaries to reduce social conflict. There was resentment amongst local actors that they were held accountable to standards, while the government as the main duty bearer was not. There was a high affinity to the core humanitarian standards, or CHS. especially since it idealizes humanitarian interactions that are aligned to the work of local development actors. The CHS has also been a guide for local actors to install system-wide changes in their organizations. Humanitarian capacity building has been mostly associated with trainings on humanitarian principles and standards, rapid damage and needs assessments, protection and do no harm, coordination systems, and humanitarian response modalities. There has also been participation-focused approaches such as survivor and community-led responses and participatory capacity, vulnerability, and risk assessments. But partnerships with international actors have emphasized system-wide capacities. Organization development has promoted changes in local organizations to incorporate a humanitarian mandate amongst development-oriented organizations. Admin and finance systems such as procurement and logistics. Human resource development that included drafting of a code of conduct, performance management, staff development and well-being, prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, safeguarding, and well-being. Risk management has also been incorporated, which included safety and security trainings and service continuity of the organization in case of disasters. While many national organizations get trainings from their international partners, most local organizations capitalized on their networks and peers to access capacity development opportunities. For capacity building, focus on organization development for system-wide change, and not just individual skills development. Promote the existing strengths of local actors in filling the gaps of duty bearers and empowering vulnerable communities. And partner with actors who enable locally led responses and empower local leaderships. These have led to enhanced social accountability, not just through formal complaint response mechanisms and transparency, but through better participation of informed, affected communities. There were more long-term and strategic partnerships amongst international, national, and local actors. There were more sharing of skills and knowledge, not just through top-down trainings, but also from peers for continuous learning. There was better downward accountability and the formation of dignity of affected communities. How about you? What are your issues in local capacity? How do you envision locally led disaster response? How do you propose to address your issues and realize your vision? Your localization workshop is an opportunity for you to voice out your issues and your vision with other local humanitarian actors.